Hi everyone and welcome to Display Repair. Have you experienced a sudden loss of power steering? So instead of the smooth, easy turning of the steering wheel, all of a sudden the steering wheel becomes stiff. It's hard to turn, especially when the car is parked. Well, if this is the case, then this video will show you the 10 most common reasons for this problem in the hope that it will help, if not solve the problem completely, then at least give you a good idea of what may be wrong. So stay tuned.
DisplayRepair.com. Be sure to visit us at our website DisplayRepair.com, where you can find more useful car and driving tips.
Now, dear viewers, before we start with the reasons, I would just like to mention one information that is very good, both for this whole video and understanding these reasons, but also for solving the problem in general. And that is to mention that there are essentially three types of power steering. There is the hydraulic system, the electrical system, and the hybrid combined system, which is combined between the hydraulic and the electrical. You have a good example on my wife's Renault Clio, on the Skoda Fabia, and I'll mention the Fiat Stilo I used to own. We'll try to explain this in shorter, quick terms, since I don't want to take much of your time. Also, that's not the point of this video. If you want more thorough information, I suggest that you visit YouTube and watch other video clips that explain this in more detail. Now, on the Renault Clio, it is the hydraulic system, which means that there is a hydraulic pump that is located here, that is belt driven by this serpentine belt right here. And as you can see, there is a pipe going from the pump to the steering rack down there. I don't know if you can see this, it's a bit tight. That's the steering rack. You can see the hydraulic piping. All in all, the point is that this hydraulic pump builds up pressure within the whole system, and when you turn the steering wheel, that pressure helps move the steering rack and again turn the wheels. So classical system, lots of cars still have this system, especially older cars only had this system until the electrical one was used. Now, to explain what was on the Fiat, I'll use the Skoda. I hope you don't mind. I mentioned it was a Fiat Stilo. The Fiat had a electric power steering system. So in this steering column here, okay, right about here, to be more exact, on the lower part, there was an electric motor. And that electric motor assisted when you turn the steering wheel. So when you turn the wheel through a sensor, the electric motor is activated, and that produces power steering and helps you turn the steering wheel more easily. And finally, we have our trusted Skoda. It combines the hydraulic and the electric power steering systems. Now, if you take a look here, besides the battery is the steering fluid reservoir. Besides it is an electric motor that produces pressure for the power steering system. So instead of a mechanically driven pump like on the Clio, there is an electric motor that produces pressure, and that is connected, I don't know if you can see this, with the steering rack down there. You can see there are hydraulic pipes to it where the VW AG sticker is. That's the steering rack. That's the way how Skoda produces on this model power steering. Now, to begin with reason number one, which is the most common reason for problems with power steering, and that is a low level of power steering fluid. So the first thing, once you notice a problem, is to check the level. First, find the power steering fluid reservoir. In case of the Skoda, it's located in this well down here. Just unscrew the cap, check the level, and besides this, also check how the fluid looks. If it's murky, if it's contaminated in some way, then you should probably consider changing the fluid altogether, since contaminated fluid can cause problems and weaker power steering. Now, if the fluid level was low, so you checked it, it's low, then you should search for leaks. Especially do this if you had to add a significant amount of steering fluid. What I would recommend on this part is to immediately check the steering rack. So you'll probably have to go under the car, but you can do it In this case, if I had to inspect it, I would take off the engine cover, get a better view, and see if there are any smudges or smears on the steering rack. For instance, here on the Skoda, as you can see, everything is nice and dry. It's only dirty from the road and there's no problems. But if you were to see stains of oil, if you were to see oil dripping from the steering rack, then that's a big red alert to solve the problem as soon as possible. Another very common cause of problems is a low pressure in the power steering system and air within that system. This is also typical for hydraulic and combined systems, so like on the Clio and like on the Skoda. There are two ways you will easily recognize this. When you start the car and try to turn the steering wheel when there is air in the system, the power steering will work, but it will be much weaker. And when you turn the steering wheel, it will be sort of sketchy, you'll turn it and it will go like this instead of the fluid motion. Besides this, you will hear a distinct whining noise coming from the engine bay. This is caused by the air in the system, and when it gets to the hydraulic pump, it starts to whine and causes this distinct sound. This will especially be present when you try to turn the steering wheel left and right. It can be very loud. Another very common reason for power steering problems, and this goes for the hydraulic system, is a bad serpentine belt. So if you see that the belt is torn or worn out, you should consider this as a problem since it can't turn the power steering pump properly, and this then means that there is not enough pressure within the system. If you see that it's torn or worn out, you should change it not only for the power steering pump, but because of other appliances also. Besides the serpentine belt, there also might be a faulty power steering pump. Now, this is a pretty rare occasion. It does happen, but most manufacturers make these power steering pumps last as much as the car. But due to material fatigue, and especially if the car has high mileage, the internals of the pump get damaged. There can't be pressure produced within the system, and the power steering will not work. So if you see on your car that the power steering pump has been replaced, if something has been tampered with, if you see leaks on this shaft here, if you see any leaks or smudges of oil around the pump, also if you hear a grinding or crunching sound from the pump, consider it as a cause of problems. The next reason, and this is specifically for the electrical power steering, like on our Skoda, if you experience problems with power steering and you have this system, the first thing you should do is check the fuses. Know that lots of cars have two places for fuses. Check your manual for where the fuses are. For instance, on the Skoda, you have a fuse box located on the left-hand side of the steering wheel, and you also have these bigger fuses under the lid of the battery. So when you raise the lid, it opens sort of in half like this, and under it you have fuses. Be sure to check them. There's also a fuse box there. I must also mention on this part that these fuses sometimes do not burn out. They sometimes might overheat and then crack due to material fatigue. I made a video specifically about this topic, how my late dad had a problem like this one on his car. I'll leave a link in the video so you can take a look. Anyway, always be sure to check these fuses also and to see if they are intact. On the Stillo, for instance, it wasn't this type of fuse, but it was a bigger, just see how big this is. It was a bigger fuse. So all in all, know where the fuses are, see what is for power steering, and be sure to check this first. If you see that the fuse is okay, the next thing you can check is the electrical connections to the electric motors. Again, this reason applies only to electric power steering systems and combined systems. Now, when and why should you check this? The Skoda is a good example. The Skoda has a power steering fluid reservoir and the electric motor for producing pressure. It is one part, and it is located inside a cavity that is under the fender and bumper. There's a big cavity, they put it inside there, and since it's near the wheel arch, since it's outside, over time, it's exposed to moisture, to water, and those elements can cause corrosion, weak contacts, material fatigue, and everything else. So if you have a situation like this one on your car, it is definitely worth the check. If you have a system like on the Fiat Stillo, where the electric motor is located on the steering column, it's a rare cause of problems. you can check it, but since it's located in the passenger cabin, it's not exposed to elements, and seldom will it cause any kinds of problems. Another super rare problem with an electric or combined system is a bad electric motor. Now this is very rare, and this is, I think, the last thing you should check. Again, you can check this by using a simple multimeter or a 12-volt tester. Check the connector to the motor. If there's input to the motor, then there's something wrong with it. Now, where is this worth looking? Just like with the electrical connections, if the power steering motor is located in a place where it's exposed to weather elements, water can get into the motor, it can fry it, and it can cause problems. Although, for instance, on the Skoda, it is very well solved, very well insulated, very well packed, and these problems are really very rare. And I think this is the case on most cars. On the Stillo, and this is only hearsay, I haven't done it myself, I've heard that on the Stillo there were problems with these motors, although also very rare, and most of them were due to the city mode. Fiat Stillo had a very convenient feature where you push a button that's located near the gear shifter, and it turns on a more powerful level of power steering. I've tried this on my Stillo. You can literally turn two 16-inch wheels with one finger. It's much like when you jack up the car and both tires are in the air. Very convenient system, but again, I've just heard about this, and this was the reason why people changed this. All in all, a very rare cause of problems. Pay attention to this reason. If there was some sort of a previous problem with the car's installation, for instance, some sort of big short circuit, if someone perhaps improperly jump-started the car, if there was some sort of tampering with the whole steering system, or if there was a higher alternator voltage. Another pretty rare cause of problems is a damaged or faulty steering rack. Again, we'll show this from this angle, I hope you don't mind. If you see any leaks, torn rubber boots, any kind of physical damage to the steering rack, then that might be a problem. Also, if you turn the steering wheel and you hear any kind of knocking while the engine is off, then you should consider inspecting. It may not be the rack, it may be something else, but it's worth the check. All in all, if you see leaks, if you see any kind of physical damage, if perhaps the wheel has hit a big pothole or something like that, if there was any kind of other physical damage, it is worth inspecting. So this on the Clio also, no problems. As you can see, everything is nice and dry. When you see a steering rack like this, it's not a guarantee, but there's a good possibility that the steering rack is okay. Also, regarding the steering rack, if you notice any kind of wobble when you turn the wheel, if you hear any kind of crunching, God forbid, when you turn the steering wheel, if you hear any kind of weird noises, you should also inspect the steering rack as soon as possible. Again, this is a very rare cause of problems. On most cars, the steering rack lasts as long as the car, but over time, and this is especially characteristical for high mileage cars, over time, due to material fatigue, the inner components may get clearances, I hope I used the right expression, and this may cause problems. If you suspect that the steering rack is the problem, again, if you see leaks, if there's any kind of physical damage, inspect the problem as soon as possible, because it is very dangerous to drive that way. And for the final reason, and that is to check all of the pipes and hoses that go from the pump to the steering rack and all the other installation regarding the power steering. Also on this part, if you have a combined system like on the Skoda, you can check all of the wiring if there isn't a pinched wire somewhere, something like that, especially if the car has been in some sort of accident or something like that. All in all, you should check that all of these pipes don't have any punctures, that they aren't bent, especially the metal pipes, the rubber hoses, that they are not punctured, and that all of those, as you can see, there's a metal pipe down there, that all of them are intact, that there is no rust and no physical damage to them. If there is any physical damage, then you will probably notice leaks or other problems. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, if there is some sort of damage, if there is any puncture or something like that, you will lose power steering fluid, air can get into the system, the power steering system will lose power, and all in all, it will cause problems. So, dear viewers, those would be the most common reasons for power steering problems. above all of these, the most common reason for trouble is the lack of power steering fluid. Check the fluid level from time to time. You don't have to do this check rigorously like with the oil level or with the coolant. You can check the power steering fluid level every couple of months. Just make sure that there is enough. Also, if possible, change the fluid on time. Most people disregard this, and the same fluid that comes from the factory is still in the car. This doesn't necessarily have to cause any problems, but over time it can get contaminated. There may be small particles inside of it. All of this can damage the pump, damage the steering rack, and so on, damage the whole system, perhaps clog the whole system and cause problems. So if possible, change the fluid in the interval recommended from the manufacturer. One more thing, and with this I will conclude the video. If you notice any damage on the steering rack, as I mentioned in the previous part of the video, if you notice any kind of physical damage, leaks, if the steering rack is greasy, if you see a torn boot or something like that, especially if you see a torn boot, go and solve that problem as soon as possible. Moisture, dirt, grit will get inside and additionally damage the steering rack. You can go to a specialized service, you can go to a mechanic and solve the problem. It may cost more money, but if you do it on time, safety is in question, so there's no price tag on that. All in all, be sure to solve it as soon as possible. Don't postpone the repair. So dear viewers, that's it for this time. I hope this video helps. If you find the time, please like and subscribe. It's a huge help for what we're doing. Also, watch our other videos where you can find other car related topics about car maintenance, about driving. All in all, a lot of things about cars that should help you. Thanks for watching, thanks for your time, and I hope I'll see you in the next video.